11 days to go for US elections. You will hear me say dead heat a lot of times because that's where things stand. Numbers are too close to say anything for certain. So before we get to what's happening on the political front, let's quickly pull a map of America on our wall and tell you where the two candidates have been campaigning. They continue their rally in battleground states. Kamala Harris was in Georgia, wooing the middle class. The state brings 16 electors this time, and Donald Trump was in Arizona and Nevada, two states which bring 11 and 6 electors each. And this leaves us with the rest of the 4 states. That's Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. Now our next report tells you what's happening on the campaign trail.
With the U.S. presidential election just a week and a half out, Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris and her Republican rival Donald Trump continued their respective campaign blitzes across swing states on Thursday. Harris held her largest political rally yet in the city of Clarkston in Georgia, one of 7 battleground states that will likely decide who wins the presidency on November 5th. Rock legend Bruce Springsteen, film director Spike Lee, and former President Barack Obama were among the high-profile Harris endorsers that took part.
It was 17 years ago, it was over 17 years ago, when I took a trip to Springfield, Illinois. It was a cold February day, and I went there to support this brilliant young senator who was running for president of the United States. And millions of Americans were energized and inspired not only by Barack Obama's message, but by how he leads, seeking to unite rather than separate us.
They, along with Harris, urged the crowd of some 20,000 to take advantage of early voting and to reject Trump.
What I cannot understand is why anybody would think that Donald Trump will shake things up in a way that is good for you, because there is absolutely no evidence that this man thinks about anybody but himself.
After an initial bump in the polls after launching her campaign in late July, Harris's lead has since evaporated in key swing states. The latest polls in Georgia now show Trump with a slight lead, but Harris campaign officials say they remain confident the state is still in play. Thursday's rally represented the latest attempt by her campaign to capitalize on the backing of celebrities to mobilize voters in the closing days of a tight election race. On Friday, she is set to appear with Beyoncé in Houston. Meanwhile, Trump on Thursday evening held a rally on the Arizona State University campus in Tempe, Arizona. Maricopa County, where Tempe is located, narrowly went for Biden over Trump in the 2020 election and remains one of the fiercest battlegrounds in the country.
What she's done and he's done, Crooked Joe and Kamala, what a combination. Worst combination in the history of our country.
Trump took shots at his customary list of targets, criticizing Biden and Harris's competence. He also made false claims about immigrants and a spike in violent crime. Studies show immigrants are not more likely to engage in criminality.
And we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail, or we'll kick them the hell out of our country as fast as we can.
More than 30 million voters have already cast their ballots as of Thursday evening, according to tracking data from the election lab at the University of Florida. More than 13 million of those votes were in person, with more than 17 million by mail-in ballot, according to the data.
Let's quickly get you the numbers now. An analysis from 38.5 show that Harris is slightly ahead in the national polls, leading Trump by 1.7 percentage points. So this is still within the margin of error. Also, national polls hardly paint the real picture since it all comes down to the swing states. And to get us some perspective, we are now being joined by Faith Pino, national political reporter for the Los Angeles Times. Faith, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us here on this broadcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I was just speaking about the swing states, and you are actually neighboring 2 of them. Why don't you tell me what's happening in the swing states?
Yeah, so I'm based in California, which is right next to Arizona and Nevada. I've spent a bit of time this year in both of the states, most recently in Arizona. And, you know, it's really quite a difference. California is a very deeply blue Democratic state. And so, you know, Kamala Harris is, unless something crazy happens, almost assuredly going to win here. But when you go to Arizona and you talk to people, I mean, it's like every other person you talk to is from a different party. And as you noted, both presidential candidates have spent a lot of time in these states. Slightly less time out here on the West Coast because it's pretty far from a lot of the swing states over on the East Coast. But President Trump was in Tempe, Arizona, as you noted last night. He has very close ties with some of the political activists there who are running essentially the Republican ground game in the state. And then Kamala Harris has been targeting a lot of niche demographic groups in Arizona. So I reported on how her campaign is targeting Native Americans, Mormon voters, you know, these sort of smaller identity groups that could make up just enough of a margin for them to swing the state.
Right, you rightly pointed out that swing states, of course, is extremely crucial to these elections. I also want to point out to the undecided voters in the swing states. In Arizona, Wisconsin, North Carolina, that number stands at about 4.6%. Now, Georgia has 4.5%, same for Pennsylvania. Michigan has 5.3%, and lastly, Nevada has 5.4%. In case you came across any of the undecided voters, what did you hear?
Yeah, you know, as you're noting with these numbers, it's really quite a small number. I think it was perhaps even smaller when President Biden was at the top of the ticket because we know these candidates, right? President Trump has been around in the U.S. Political scene for over 8 years now, and Kamala Harris has been vice president for a while. So people, for the most part, know how they feel about these candidates. The folks that I've spoken to, you know, they know these people, and it comes down to just having one last thing push them over the edge. One of the undecided voters that I spoke to had actually just registered to vote for the first time. He was 24 years old in Arizona, and his girlfriend convinced him that he needed to vote because it was an important election, and you know, this was their responsibility as citizens. And, you know, he was just kind of up in the air, like, well, I don't know too much yet about both of the candidates, which to me just meant that he hadn't really been tuning into the kind of information that the candidates are giving, because their, you know, election news in the US is all over, and you really can't escape it in these swing states either. I mean, there's ads on the radio, on the television, you know, in print. It's just inescapable. So I think some of the last undecided voters have just been probably tuning it out up till this point, or they're waiting, like I said, for that kind of final straw to push them over the edge.
Faith, I would love to speak to you more, but I'm completely out of time. I look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks, you're welcome.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.